There's a story that happened a while ago, maybe 150 years ago, maybe a little longer, that there was a alta chassidische minig, that on Lag Boimer, they used to go out into the field and they would stay out in the field for the whole of Lag Boimer. That means to say that they would go out in the evening Erev Lag Boimer, and they would spend the whole night and the whole next day into the next night out in the field, doing what Chassidim do, learning, davening, farbringing. It was a special gathering, a special occasion, where they would spend this entire period of time off in feld. As is the minig, Lag Boimer, go out into the field. And there's minig, the way the minig was that sometime during the course of the Me'es L'es of Lag Boimer, the Rebbe would come Lubavitch, and he would say Chassidus, and then he would go home, and then the Chassidim would continue to farbring. It was 1 year Lag Boimer, and Lag Boimer was on a Tuesday. And the minig is, by some Yidden, that after Pesach you fast Bahab, Beis Hey Beis, Monday, Thursday, Monday, after Pesach and after Sukkot. And there were a group of Choshev Chassidim, very frum Yidden, who fasted Bahab. And Erev Lag Boimer, that means Yud Zayin Iyar, was the second Monday of Bahab. There's a reason why it could be so late. It's the fact that they were fasting Monday, and Tuesday was Lag Boimer. So they got together a Bezdin, and the Bezdin paskened that because of Sudas Mitzvah, even though many of them had been fasting Bahab for many years, so it has a din of a neder, they could be mata neder, they could wash, and they could start the Su'ud of Lag Boimer while it was still day. And all of the Chassidim broke their fasts, they were mata neder, and they washed, and they participated in the Su'ud, which was the beginning of Lag Boimer. With the exception of one Chassid, who in the Chabad circles is very, very famous, maybe even outside Chabad people have heard his name. His name was Hillel of Parich, Hillel Paricher. He's a very big chassid. He was a tzaddik. The Tzemach Tzedek called him a tzaddik. He was a very special person. And he refused to wash, to break his fast. He said he's going to wait till nightfall. He wants to finish his fast. And it's known that this Rebbe Hillel was a gewaldige frumerid. He was extremely frum. There's an expression, I don't know where it comes from, but I would imagine it has a good source, that some Rebbe said once, that a tzaddik b'maiseh, a tzaddik in the area of Hidden Mitzvah, frumkeit, like Rebbe Hillel, there hadn't been for 300 years. The 300 years prior to Rebbe Hillel lived the Beis Yosef and the Ramah, and I don't have to say anymore. He was extremely frum. His frumkeit was to the point of Mesiras Nefesh. There's some stories that they tell about his frumkeit. The State and Sefer Chassidim. Now, I don't want anybody here to start getting excited. If you want to do this, you have to speak that off. That you're not supposed to ride across a bridge. So when you come to a bridge in a wagon, you're supposed to get out and walk across. And it happened once that Hillel was sleeping in a wagon, and it came to the bridge. He woke up. It wasn't shaykh by him. There's something which is according to the Shulchan Aruch that he should violate. And he had all kinds of stories like this. He had a Getlach Hasayata Deshmai. He was frum mamish to the point of Mesiras Nefesh. That another little story about his frumkeit. That 1 year, it was the 15th day of the month, and there hadn't been a lavona, there hadn't been a moon, a whole chodesh, and he wasn't able to makadosh the lavona. And the Chassidim was sitting, and he was waiting for the moon to come out, so he went in special to the Rebbe, to the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said to the Rebbe, but there's no moon, we need a moon. So Tzemach Tzedek told him, his Rebbe, that it's Tzedayna Lavona. Anyways, about 2 or 3 in the morning, the moon came out, but it was still cloudy, it wasn't perfectly clear. So some people ran outside and they made the Kiddush Lavona. And he said, the Rebbe said there's going to be a moon, this is not sufficient. And he waited a couple more hours, and the moon came out very bright, and he was Makadosh Lavona. And he told one of his Talmidim, he said, when I was younger once, there was also no moon, I wasn't able to Makadosh Lavona. He says, but now, it says, Gloib Mir. If there wouldn't be a moon, I don't know if I would make it. In other words, the Agmas Nefesh, the agony of not being able to Makadosh Lavona, would costed him his life. He passed away Yud Aleph of. And the reason that it's given is because he fasted Tisha B'Av and he wasn't up to it. He passed away 2 days after Tisha B'Av. He was a very big tzaddik. He was frum mamish to the point of Mesiras Nefesh. And he refused to wash, and he continued fasting. By this gathering of Chassidim, there were Chassidim who were much older than him. From the Alter of Chassidim were much older than him. He was relatively speaking young. And one of the Chassidim who was older than him had a very big problem with his frumkeit. He felt like it was frumkeit shalobim kaimis, too much frum in an inappropriate way, in a wrong way. So as they were sitting around and everybody else was eating and he was still fasting, so this alter it says to this Rebbe Hillel that he's not happy with his frumkeit, and he told him in no uncertain terms that everything has a time and a place and this is not appropriate. So Rebbe Hillel started to cry, this chassid about whom we're talking. And when he calmed down, he says, I want to tell you a story. And he proceeded to tell the story of his life and his struggles as a young man, and the way he put it, Gezur the Memes, he was looking for the truth. And how he was born a chassid, he wasn't born a Chabad chassid, he was born a Chernobyl chassid. And how when he personally felt very, very satisfied, very comfortable in Chabad, and this to him was the truth. And he told this whole gut-wrenching story of his pursuit of the emes, how all he wanted in his life was the truth. And he finished up the story with these words, and this is the reason I'm telling this story. He said, Gloib mir, alle meine Hider Mitzvah is kedei soll verstehen a Wort Chassidus besser. He said, believe me, all of my frumkeit, all of my Mesiras Nefesh for Yiddishkeit, and he was frum mamish to the point of Mesiras Nefesh, is all that I should understand a little Chassidus a little bit better. I should feel the union of Chassidus a little bit better. This is the story. Why am I telling the story? What's the message of the story? There is a classical chinuch, Sefer HaChinuch, which he says when he gets to Matzah and Pesach, which is used a lot in a lot of different situations because it has relevance literally to every aspect of Torah. And the chinuch says, this is the quote from the chinuch, Acharei ha'pu'ulos nimshachim halavoves. That means literally, after the pu'ula, after the deed, nimshachim halavoves, the heart is drawn. What this means is the following. We all know, as Yidden, and as people even, that life consists of things that we need to do. And when we do the things that we do in the course of our lives, we have a kavanah. For the most part, when we do things, we have a reason for doing them. If we don't have a reason for doing them, so either it's called Kabbalah Sel Machashamayim, or it's called Shtus. Right? But people, when they do things, as they say in American, have a motivation. There's a reason they do things. In the world of Torah, we call this the kavanah of a mitzvah. A person does a mitzvah, they have a kavanah, a spirit, a soul behind the mitzvah. And people often discuss and question what should be the Seder HaDvarim, what should be the procedure, how should they approach things. Should a person wait till they're in the mood of something and then do it? Or should the person first do it and then hope to be in the right mood? Should a person say, this is a good idea, this is a good venture, this is a good thing that I should adopt, but I'm not holding by it, so maybe I'm not going to do it, and therefore I'm going to wait till I'm on that madrig and then I'm going to do it? Or should the person say, whether I'm holding by it or I'm not holding by it, let me do it, and so forth, I'm going to come to it. So the Sefer HaChinuch says, a cloud, a principle in reality, in life, and in human psychology, and you don't have to be once he says it, it makes so much sense, that in human nature, and therefore also in Yiddishkeit, and Torah, and in mitzvahs, after what we do, comes our feelings. In other words, Yiddishkeit doesn't say first you have to feel like it and then you do it. Rather, first you do it and then you'll feel like it. But it's actually saying something more. If you're going to wait to do it until you're in the mood, it's never going to happen. On the other hand, if you know that Hashem said you got to do, you have to do, and sof kol sof you'll be holding by the madreg of doing it, then it will materialize. And this is Yiddishkeit. Every Yid knows you don't do mitzvahs because you're in the mood. You do mitzvahs because Hashem said. And the philosophy of life of a frum Yid is, I have to do all the mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs I love, and some mitzvahs I don't necessarily enjoy. But the point is, Hashem said I have to do, I have to do. Now, first of all, just doing the Ratzon, just doing what Hashem wants itself is its own merit. But even if a person wants to feel and experience the union of Yiddishkeit, if I do mitzvahs and I don't have so much chayas, my child will do mitzvahs and maybe he'll have chayas. But if Chas v'Shalom, I'm going to say, since I don't feel whatever I'm supposed to, so I'm going to wait to be in the mood of Mizrach, my child doesn't stand a chance. and it's true from generation to generation, and it's true in the life of each individual person, that the Yid knows, first you have to do the Ratzon Elyon, first you have to do the wishes of Hashem Yisbarach, and afterwards you can understand, afterwards you can appreciate. The bottom line is you have to do. Why am I giving you this introduction? Because this week we're learning Parsha Shlach, and I was thinking to speak dafka about something that nobody would think I would talk about. And I decided that we'll have a discussion about tzitzis. I know that tzitzis is a mitzvah that's not for women. Women don't put on tzitzis. They don't. Not only they're not mechuyev, but the mitzvah is that they don't wear tzitzis because it's a mitzvah seisha azman groma. It's a ksus yoyim. Tzitzis has to do with the daytime. But the inyan of tzitzis is a part of Torah also. In addition to being a mitzvah, certainly has a relevance to every single yid. And the last discussion in our Parsha Shlach is about tzitzis, and I want to discuss tzitzis just a little bit. What are tzitzis? Tzitzis are a garment, a big baguette, that has strings coming out of the edges. Right? If a baguette has arba kanfas, as some people call the tzitzis, if it has 4 corners, so there's a mitzvah say you have a positive commandment in the Torah, you're not allowed to wear tzitzis otherwise, to put tzitzis, to put tzitzis into the corner of your garments, and only then you're allowed to wear them. And if you've read the Chumash carefully, you know that in the olden days, people used to actually have a psil techeles, right, of the strings of the tzitzis. One of them was actually a navy blue, a dark blue psil, which came from a fish called a chelazin, that we don't have nowadays, because I don't know what it is. I'm sure you will know that there's a group of chassidim who wear, I saw it myself, chilazin, and if you know which one it is, you can tell me, because I forgot off the top of my head. Because before the war, the Rebbe decided that he knew which was dam chilazin, and he... not Rishon, no. Radzin. Chassidim, I chassidim with my noiget. They wear tzitzis with tcheles. Very good, but I don't think you're wearing tzitzis. Okay, very good.
They don't wear the tcheles.
They don't wear the tcheles. I saw little boys, Radzin and Yingelach, that also wear the tcheles. From whatever the case is, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, whatever it was, Yidden used to wear a blue, it says in the Torah has to be blue, psil tcheles, and that one thread had to be from wool, and in certain cases they were even able to wear sharpness. Okay, those particulars are not so important. What is the significance of mitzvahs tzitzis? This is the discussion that I want to have. And basically, the introduction that I gave you underscores the essence of it. Think of of a baguette as Yiddishkeit. Think of a talis, think of the garment of a tzitzis as being Yiddishkeit. What does a person do with a talis? They wrap themselves in it completely. They wrap it in themselves so that it surrounds them and it encompasses them completely. The talis of the tzitzis represent the idea that a Yid wraps himself in Yiddishkeit and in Torah and in Avodah completely. He's in ganzen eingewickelt. He's completely surrounded by Torah and Yiddishkeit. Hashem says it's not enough. Being wrapped in tzitzis is wonderful. You also need to have strings. Why do you need to have strings? What would be wrong if you just were wearing the garment? Why would you need to have strings? And the answer is because the strings represent the Maisa. The string represents doing, the deed, the behavior. It's the chayda, it's the chitzonius, it's the periphery of a garment. The garment surrounds you completely. The beged represents the warmth of Yiddishkeit, the chayis of Yiddishkeit, the emunah of Yiddishkeit. The string is the fringe, it's the very edge. Torah says that if a person wears tzitzis, and the tzitzis are kosher, it's not sufficient that you're wearing a garment. The garment has to have a thread that comes out of the edge of the beged. And in Avodas Hashem, what the garment of the tzitzis and the strings of the tzitzis represent, the garment of the tzitzis, as I mentioned, represents all the warmth, chayes of Avodas Hashem and Yiddishkeit, and the strings represents the deed. Torah says you have to have strings in the tzitzis. Now we're going to learn next week in the Chumash, Parsha Shlach, that this was one of Korach's issues. It says in Mamar Chazal that Korach got garments, dal kanfas garments made entirely of blue wool, 100% blue wool. But he didn't put tzitzis into these garments. And he came to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says to Moshe Rabbeinu, talis shekulat cheles, a garment which is entirely of blue wool. Chayavet b'tzitzis, I p'tura. Does it need to have tzitzis, or is it potter from tzitzis? What does that mean in terms of Avodas Hashem? Korach comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, Moshe Rabbeinu, if there's a Yid who's entirely wrapped in Torah and Yiddishkeit. His whole life, his whole world, his whole reality is Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem and Amunas Hashem and Chachmas Hashem. He learns Torah and he loves Hashem and he fears Hashem and he believes in Hashem. Does he need to have tzitzis? In other words, is it important for such a person to do Ma'aseh mitzvahs, the behavior of mitzvahs? And is it important that the Ma'aseh mitzvahs, that the deed of the mitzvahs be tantamount, be a priority? Says Moshe Rabbeinu. And if you don't have tzitzis in this garment, the garment can be very holy and they can wrap him completely. And you know what? It's not Yiddishkeit. If Yiddishkeit does not come down to a tzitzis, if it doesn't come down to something that a person does, in other words, out of all of the feelings, out of all of the chayas, all of the warmth, all of the spirit, the ruchnius of a Yiddishkeit does not materialize a deed or ma'aseh b'poyel, then it's not Yiddishkeit at all. A beged, which is entirely made from blue wool, in other words, it's full of spiritual warmth, it doesn't have a tzitzis possible. And that's what the mitzvah of tzitzis, amongst, of course, many other things, means to indicate. That if you're wrapped completely in Yiddishkeit, if there's no tzitzis at the edge, it's not Yiddishkeit. And if you're familiar with Jewish history, this is just perhaps a parenthesis, maybe it's not such a parenthesis. There was a Jewish community in Sfad, in Spain. And Jewish people in Spain lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe 500-600 years, until the expulsion. And just derech agav, we all talk about the Spanish expulsion and the Spanish Inquisition. It should be mentioned also that the Spanish were the last Europeans, the last of the Western Europeans to expel the Jews. The British were the first in 1290, almost 200 years, more than 200 years before the Spanish expelled the Jews. England got rid of all of its Jews. And the French were schizophrenic. Took them 100 years, they kept on changing their mind. But also 100 years before Spain expelled its Jews, France did. So it's not only Spain, there's a Bangamach Diden Sadas. But in any event, the Jewish community of Spain lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's so often called the Tur HaZohav, the golden chain, or the golden age of Spain, whatever it is. But this golden age and golden chain has a very significant grey cloud. And from a historical point of view, and even from an Avodas Hashem for Yiddishkeit point of view, this really led to a lot of the tzadis. Spanish Jews were very involved in Chochmas HaMechkar, in Jewish philosophy, in Jewish philosophical thought. Now, Chochmas HaMechkar, Jewish philosophy, I should really say, I don't even want to say Jewish philosophy. Philosophy is not Torah. The creator of philosophy, which was very popular at that time, was a guy named Aristotle. The Rambam calls him Aristoi. He was a very smart man. He lived in the time of the first place, Hamikdash, near Churban by Rishon. He was a big genius. And he had a thesis, a mechanism by which he understood the world and everything in it. And ironically, more than 1,000 years after he lived, this was very popular. In the Dark Ages, in the Middle Ages, to be a modern, to be a sophisticated person, you had to be involved in what was called Chochmah, philosophy. And a lot of Yidden got very caught up in philosophy. And it did a lot of damage to the Jewish soul. An unbelievable amount of damage was done by philosophy to Yiddishkeit. Why? Because philosophy is cold. Seichel B'chal is cold. And it enhances the gaiva, the ego of a person. And it undermined Yiddish emunah. The simple faith, which is the foundation, which is the basis for Yiddish survival, was made weak by all of this chokhmah. And in Spain specifically, there were many Jews who were so involved in this chokhmah of mechkar philosophy that they believed, Rahmanu Islam, that this philosophy was deeper than the Torah. That the mitzvahs ma'asiyos, the Rambam, you can even find this indication perhaps in the Rambam. The mitzvahs ma'asiyos, the deeds of the mitzvahs, this is the chitzeni, this is the goof of the Torah. The soul of the Torah, this is the meaning, the badait, the underlying basis for Yiddishkeit. And Yidden started to neglect Yiddishkeit. There was a movement in Spain of people who considered themselves frum. They considered themselves frum people. But they said, why do you need to do the mitzvahs if you understand the soul of the mitzvah? The ikir of a mitzvah, they argued, was the badait, the kavanah. And since they were big philosophers, so they substituted, Rahman al-Islam, the spirit, the philosophy of the Great Shiur philosophy, which they adapted to Torah, to doing mitzvahs. And a long time ago, 700 years ago, 600 years ago, the Samag, the Sefer Mitzvah, Rav Shimshon Mikutzi, went to Spain from France, and he said that he met tens of thousands of Yidden who considered themselves frum people who had never worn tefillin in their lives. Never, not once. In other words, what had happened was the so-called Chochmas HaMechkar, the philosophy, the Chochma, what people would call perhaps the Kavanah of Yiddishkeit, took over Yiddishkeit, and people failed to recognize the necessity for Tzitzis. That Yiddishkeit has to materialize into a mice, into a deed. We live in a world of action, and just like in everything else in our lives, everything is measured in action. If a person wants their home to be beautiful, wanting your home to be beautiful doesn't make it beautiful. You have to make it beautiful, and the only way to make it beautiful is through deeds, and you can only do one deed at a time. In Torah and in Yiddishkeit, also everything comes down to the tzitzis. All the kavanah, all the spirit, all the intent, all the meaning, all the spiritual worth of Torah v'Avodah is true only when it comes down to a ma'aser pearl, only when it materializes into a behavior. And in Spain, because of this preoccupation, the Chochmas HaMechkar, people were cold to ma'aser mitzvahs. It wasn't important. What's important is what it means. What were the solutions to this problem? So there were essentially two approaches. One approach was, for example, the approach of the Rambam, where Gedolei Yisrael wrote Sfarim in Chakira, according to the principles of this Chochmah, to prove that you have to keep Torah and mitzvahs. Like the Rambam's made in Nevuchim, the Rasag's Emunas V'Deis, the Yosef Albu's Ikrim. There's a lot of Sfarim that are written to show through this Chochmah that you have to keep Torah and mitzvahs. And another approach was to make a Cherem, the Rashba, the Ramban and others, prohibiting the study of this philosophy. So some people's approach was show people through this Chochmah that you're supposed to be a Yid, and the other approach was you have to prohibit the study. Now I don't want to go into the history, I certainly don't want to go into the Machlekes. Anybody that's familiar with our history knows that this was a very volatile, involved Machlekes, one for a very, very long time. But there was a Machlekes amongst Gedolei Yisrael, not amongst little children. The end of the story is, and this is the tragic part, that if we're familiar with the history of the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, we know that Kiddush Hashem was a fundamental part of Jewish life, unfortunately. There were many an occasion where Yidden gave their lives for Torah mitzvahs. When Spanish Jewry was confronted with that question, in great numbers, Rahman al-Islam, they converted to another das, to a different faith. The date is in 1391. 1391 is 100 years before the Spanish expulsion, which was in 1492. There was a certain period of time when Spain was without a king. It was a transitional time. And the fanatics, the Frumakis, the Goyim, forcibly converted tens of thousands of Jews to Nazareth, to Christianity. Amongst them, there were some big Talmidei Chachamim. There's a fellow, I forgot his name, who the Rivash used to correspond with. The Rivash is one of the Rishonim. He used to write to him in Torah. And he called him a Chacham Talazachem. And he became Rahman al-San a Notzri, a Goy. And he became one of the biggest anti-Semites. He wrote books against Torah and Yiddishkeit. In Germany, when there were Shmodas, in France when there were Shmodas, in other parts where there were Shmodas, Yidden gave their lives, unquestionably. And part of the reason in Spain it didn't materialize that way is because there was a kalkeit to Yiddishkeit. There was a coldness towards Yiddishkeit. And the root, the source of that coldness was this involvement in the Chochmas HaChakira. Now, just to give you the historical, I might as well finish this discussion. You all know about the Inquisition. Right? The Inquisition was a law, a system that was enacted by the Spanish government before the expulsion, before Jews were kicked out of Spain, to guard against Christians becoming Jews. If you were from Yid, nobody stopped you from being a Yid. The Inquisition was originally enacted to prevent Christians from converting to Judaism. Them embodied us. Who cares? I'll tell you what it was. These were really Yidden who had converted to Nazareth, had converted to Christianity with the sword, and wanted to become Balei Tshuva. It was them that the Spanish government was fighting against. And the ultimate expulsion of Jews from Spain and the Inquisition, this is the history of it. There were these forcible conversions where many Yidden were ripped away from Yiddishkeit, pushed with the threat with their lives. And later they prevented them from coming back to Yiddishkeit. And of course, how can you stop Yidden from coming back to Yiddishkeit? And in the end they had to kick all Jews out of Spain to protect these Goyim who were actually Yidden, who had been misnatzed, be'oinest, by force, from returning to Teda and Avodah. Now, Bechlal, Yidden finden sich to say nice things about people, especially people who sind auf jener Welt. Ich weiß damit einmal gehört, that Yidden were once led in Lashon Hara. It happened once or twice in our history, we get Lashon Hara. So I didn't say, you shouldn't talk that way. Havas, or as a Sheikh Enofer. He died. No, Eicha Yiches, a Sheikh Enofer. Okay. But the point is, I'm not telling you the story, Chas v'Shalom, to bring out something negative. I'm telling you the story to bring out this point. That the Eibishter gave us a Torah. And the design of Torah and mitzvahs is that it's connected to Maisa. It's connected to deed. And like I said, the symbol of this in our discussion are the Tzitzis and the Beged. If you have a Beged that's entirely Tchelis, and you should know the word Tchelis, which means blue, also connotes Kiloyin. Kiloyin means a Yid Geitois to the Meibishten, a Jew whose whole life is Avodas Hashem. Everything in his mitzvah is Yiddishkeit. If he has no Tzitzis, he's not kosher. Tzitzis means you have to do mitzvahs b'maisa. And the simple reason is because we live in a world of action. And in a world of action, the sign that something is real is that it translates into a maisa. It's a lot of cardiac Jews. A cardiac Jew means who's a Jew at heart. It's not, you can't be a cardiac Jew. You have to be a behavioral Yid. You have to do mitzvahs. Now of course, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But I want to emphasize why this is. Why did Hashem set up that Yiddishkeit makes such a shtudim out of doing mitzvahs? And you should know, if a Yid has an option to sit for 6 hours and to meditate, for example, on what tefillin are, or he has 5 minutes to do the Maisa of tefillin, the 5 minutes of the deed is more important than 6 hours of meditation. Because Hashem is interested in what we do because of various different reasons. The first reason is the point I've made until now, because if you'll do, sof kol sof, you'll feel and you'll mean. On the other hand, if you feel and you mean, you don't do, tomorrow you'll feel different, tomorrow you'll mean different. Your child, Rahman Latham, won't have your feelings. And this is one of the explanations for why Yiddishkeit is defined dafke and maisa. And it can also be explained with another aspect, another detail can be added to this. And that is that human nature is such, the teva b'nei adam, the way Hashem designed people, is that we're all very smart. But people are separate from animals. One of the differences between people and animals is our measure of intelligence. We're smarter than they. But our increased intelligence doesn't make us better, per se. A person, we can use our intelligence to be more destructive than any animal could possibly be. And one way of explaining it is to look at it like this. Chokhmah, wisdom, intelligence, is like a tool. Plumbers have tools, clay umlas, electricians have tools, human beings have tools. One of the tools of a person is seichel. You are not your intellect, you're your conscience. You're your koyach habchira, your power of free will, and your sense of right and wrong. Your instincts of good and bad, right and wrong. What the Eibishter wants and what the Eibishter doesn't want. When you look at Chokhmah as a tool, you realize something interesting. What can you do with a tool? You can use it for very constructive purposes, and you can use it to destroy. Fire can be used to provide warmth and light and nourishment, and fire can destroy. Same is true with human intelligence. The intellect of a person is deep and tricky, and it can be used in a very destructive way. The problem is, we all are predisposed, we all have an atiyah. There's something in us that wants us to use our sheikhah, that wants us to use our minds in a way that's not healthy. It's called the Yetzer Hara. It's called the Nefesh Abamis, the animal soul. The Yetzer Hara says to you, listen, use your chokhmah. But your chokhmah is going to lead to the conclusion that in order to be a man, you have to do kach v'kach. And it's not consistent with the way Yishta wants. And people have a brilliant ability, people are smart in a way that no animal is, to explain with their own minds, to justify with their own minds the worst things that you could possibly imagine, and his Beidim Sichim have wonderful explanations. The Rebbe once by Fabrengen mentioned that it's known, it's documented, that during World War II, when the Nazis were systematically eliminating Rachmana Litzlan, and this is, they were going to 6 million Yidden to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim Barabim. They had very strict laws against cruelty to animals. The same society, the same people, and the same Chochmah. Why? Because Chochmah is a tool. Chochmah doesn't have a conscience. You can use it for the most moral purposes, and you can use it for the most corrupt purposes. But when is that the case? When your mind is controlled by your Yetzer Hara. When your mind is controlled by Yetzer Hara, then you use your Chochmah to serve Hashem better. And one of the critical, so to speak, guards, protections that's established in Torah Avodah and Yiddishkeit, that our Chochmah should be used in a constructive way, not Chas v'Shalom the opposite, is that everything is defined in a Maisa. This is how I do it, this is not how I do it. This is allowed, this is not allowed. It's not theoretical, it's not ruchnius. It materializes in an action. And as I've explained to you in the past, it says in Sfarim, if a Yid looks at Yiddishkeit, and I mean mitzvahs, you see a very basic and very simple point, not a very deep, mystical point, but a very Baal point. Hashem has something to say about everything in our life. There is not one area in reality that Hashem says, do as you please. A home, there's a way to make a home. Right? A mic, a mezuzah. There are halachas about how home is supposed to be. Clothing, there are halachas about clothing, whether it's tnius, whether it's shatnez, whether it's other things. There's not an area, not an aspect in life where Hashem doesn't say, do like this and do like that. The significance of that, by Hashem attaching a maisa, deed, to a yonim of Yiddishkeit, He secures that we shouldn't get too smart. Because when you get too smart, you can use your chokhmah to justify literally, not virtually, but literally anything. And this is why everything in Yiddishkeit comes down, like I said, to the Tzitzis. It's not enough that you have the spirit of Yiddishkeit. The bottom line is you have to have Tzitzis. And if it tells us shekulah tcheles, the garment is entirely tcheles. It's entirely kiloyin. It's an expiration for Hashem. If it doesn't have strings, in English they say it doesn't have teeth in it. If it doesn't translate into a deed, it's not what Hashem wants. And that's the lesson of tzitzis. Now I want to, of course, point out, so people shouldn't misunderstand, that's not the reason for mitzvahs. That's one thought about mitzvahs. Ultimately, why did Hashem give us mitzvahs? Because that's what He wanted. And there never is a because. In Yiddishkeit, the end of it all is that's what Hashem wants. Chas v'shalom, to define Yiddishkeit in a specific way, or even in various different ways. In the end, why do we do mitzvahs? Because Hashem said. But one of the insights that we can understand in our lives, in our avodas Hashem, is the point that I'm making. That wrapping yourself in a certain spirit can be a selfish exercise. And when one wraps themselves in a certain spirit, that it becomes a selfish exercise, it becomes a subjective exercise, which means tomorrow you feel different. But when there are strings attached, when you have to do a certain way, and you're not allowed to do a certain other way, then that kind of mistakes can't happen. Which leads us to a very interesting thought, and this is how I'm going to finish off this discussion. If you look in our Parsha, the last three discussions of the Parsha are these. The first of the last three discussions is the halachot of Avodah Zarah, Karbanos, where a person worshipped idols. The second is about Shabbos, Mekoshish, a person who's Machal Shabbos and he has a certain consequence. Sorry. And the last is Tzitzis. The last three discussions of the Parsha are Avodah Zarah, Shabbos, and Tzitzis. And Rashi brings from the Gemara Chazal, why does the Parsha end with these three things? Because all these three things have something in common. That the Shokol Keneged Kol HaTorah, Avodah Zarah, Shabbos, and Tzitzis are the equivalent of the whole Torah. And it's very strange. That Avodah Zarah is equivalent to the whole Shabbos, we can understand. Why? What's Avodah Zarah? God forbid, not recognizing Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, not recognizing the unity of Hashem. The whole world is created for Hashem. The whole world is Hashem. The whole existence is to serve Hashem. If Rahman al-Islam, somebody gives honor to some other entity, it's Avodah Zarah. It's terrible Avodah. So it stands to reason that Avodah Zarah should be like the whole Torah. Person worship idols is the worst idol in the world. Shabbos. Why is Shabbos Shakal Keneged Kol Torah Kula? It's a little bit more difficult to understand. But there's also a very good explanation. Because one of the reasons for Shabbos is why? That Shabbos reminds us there's a creator. It says in Sfarim. Shabbos reminds us that there's a creator. Why? Because you have Shabbos and then comes Sunday again. The idea that after 7 days comes the first day and not the 8th day reminds us of that Hashem made the world in 6 days and the 7th day He rested. Or in the Lashon in the Sfarim is that Shabbos reminds us of Chidush Ha'elam, that the world was created not Chas v'Shalom Kadmus. That means that it always existed. So Avodah Zarah is Shakal Keneged Kol Torah makes sense. To say that Chas v'Shalom, worshipping idols, is a violation of the whole Torah is entirely reasonable. To say that not keeping Shabbos is a violation of the whole Torah is also entirely reasonable. Why? Because Shabbos underscores the idea that Hashem created the world. Again, you say that does. But Tzitzis? Why is Tzitzis connected to all the mitzvahs? So everybody knows what Rashi says, again, also from the Sfarim, that the relationship between Tzitzis and the mitzvahs is because the word Tzitzis, Tzaddik Yud, Sof, has the numerical equivalent of 600. And then you have 8 strings. And 5 knots, 8 and 5 is 13. 13 and 600 is 613, 613 mitzvahs. That's why it says, when you look at the tzitzis, or the Isa Meisa, you look at the tzitzis, what's happening is called mitzvahs Hashem, it reminds you of all the mitzvahs. Because tzitzis have in them a remes for 613. But another point that explains why tzitzis corresponds to the whole Yiddishkeit is the discussion we just had. You have a complete garment of tchelis. Says Moshe Ben, you haven't done a mitzvah. You have a garment that doesn't have any tchelis. But at the edges you have tzitzis, it's kosher. One Jew could be filled with all the warmth that a Jew could possibly want. And he doesn't have tzitzis, he doesn't do the mitzvah of Hashem, that's not Yiddishkeit. Another Jew could be at a much lower madrege. Doesn't have all that warmth, all that kiloyim. But he does what the Eibishter wants, that's a Yid. And this is why tzitzis also with shagol is equivalent to all the mitzvahs. Because tzitzis indicates the idea that the way Hashem wants us to do mitzvahs in this world, that everything centers on the Ma'aseh B'Avayah. And just to introduce this a little bit, what we're going to have next week, that's Kairach's mistake. Kairach comes along to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, why do you have to have tzitzis? The garment is all wool. Or the other example which is brought in Chazal, if you have a bayis mois for them, a room full of sefer teiros, the whole room is sefer teiros, do you need a mezuzah or not? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, yes. Kairach says, what for? The whole room is Torah. Why do you need a mezuzah at the door? The whole garment is tcheles. Why do you need to have tzitzis? And the answer in both cases is because Hashem wants to inspire, Hashem wants to teach, and Hashem wants to give direction. That in this world is called Olam Ha'Maaseh, a world of deed. Yiddishkeit is defined, it's anchored in Maaseh, not in Kavanah. The Seder in Yiddishkeit is Naaseh and Ishma. First you do the mitzvahs and then you have all the Kavanahs in the world, but the foundation of Yiddishkeit is you have to do mitzvahs and taka b'zehirus. What does the word zehirus mean? Carefully, but zehirus is also from the word v'hamaskilim yazhiru k'zayah harakia, lichtik. The mitzvahs should shine, should glow, should radiate like an Evan Sapi, like a diamond. But the beginning of Yiddishkeit is that we do the mitzvahs. And the Kavanas of mitzvah can be all wonderful and very glorious, but all that comes later. But the opposite is also true. In other words, notwithstanding this whole discussion, the flip side of the coin is also emes. And that is that the tzitzis have to be attached to a beged. You can't just wear strings. The strings have to be attached to a garment. That means to say it like this. On the one hand, and this is the point we've made, the important thing is that we do the mitzvahs, and to appreciate that Yiddishkeit is defined by Maaseh, by behavior, not by kavanah. On the other hand, that the strings are not attached to a garment, it's not tzitzis. A person, it's hot in the summertime, you don't want to wear a beged, so you take a little waistband and you tie strings to the edge. Yeah? That's not tzitzis, of course. Tzitzis is dafka in a beged. Because the beged, the garment, represents the ruchnius of Yiddishkeit. The ruchnius of Yiddishkeit has many definitions. Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, the passions of Yiddishkeit. Emunah is the spirit of Yiddishkeit. All of that is represented by the beged, by the garment. So though on the one hand, as we've said now for half an hour or so, the most important thing is the Maisa, the deed, but the Maisa has to be connected to Emunah, to a certain ruchnius, a certain spirit, a certain kavanah. Now by way of conclusion, I'm just going to share with you a thought that's connected to Opshenish. I made this thought once on the previous occasion, but I'll touch on it also. There's a minig by Chassidim, by Sfadim, by a lot of Yidden, that you don't cut a child's hair until they're 3. And at the age of 3, the child gets his first haircut, and that's when he starts to do mitzvahs. He wears a talit, he wears tzitzis, he wears a yarmulke, and so on. It's important to point out that the inyan of an Opshenish is not to cut off the hair, necessarily. The boy has hair, depends. Some children have a lot of hair, some children have very little hair, right? Some children pull it out, or have help pulling it out. So when it comes to the Opshenish, every child has a different amount of hair. The issue is that it's gadol pera, it's wild. It's uncontrolled. We don't do anything with the hair. When the child becomes 3 years old, we cut off the hair. What's the important thing? We leave over payas. What's the translation of the word paya? Paya means the edge. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to leave paya. What's such paya? If you have a field and you're cutting, you're harvesting your crop, you have to leave over a paya. A paya means avinkala, a little corner for the yani, for the poor person who comes and he collects paya. A child has a chiyuv, has a mitzvah that leisakifu. You're not allowed to cut off the edges of it. You have to leave over payas. And the significance of payas at the end of a head is very similar to tzitzis at the end of a beged. A person has a head. The head represents their chokhmah, their seichel. What's a kosher yid? That at the end of the head is tzitzis. At the end of the head is payas. After all the chokhmah, after all the wisdom, there's a bottom line. I do what the Eibishter wants. And if a person's mind is full of chokhmah, and as a result he's a from leisakifu. What's leisakifu? You know what it says in the Rambam? In the olden times, and apparently it's true today also, a galach, the way a galach took a haircut was dafke in eifin of hakofa. He made a circle around the sides of his head and deliberately cut off the edges. They left hair on top of the head, and they dafke shaved off completely the payas. And according to the Rambam and the Nevuchim, this is one of the reasons for payas. Not to do like the Avodah Zarah. And Baruch Nisan Yanim, in other words, the Galach thinks, if your mind is full of Chokhmah, the payas, the edges are not important. So Torah says it's exactly the opposite. All the Chokhmah in the world is only true if it translates into payas. But if Rahman's on there isn't payas, then it's tignish, it's no good. So why don't we cut the child's hair until 3 and leave payas? Because until 3 years old, taka a child, the koch, and a child is not mitzvahs. Until 3 years old, we don't yet mechanech a child in mitzvahs. There's such a thing called higiyah l'chinuch, an age of chinuch. Until 3 years old, the koch, the preoccupation with a child is emunah. The idea that everything is not necessarily coming down to a deed. But after the age of 3, and 3 is young, we cut off the child's hair and we leave payas, teach the child. Until now, it was taka vilda emunah, it was wild emunah. Now you're old enough, and you're still not mechoyev in mitzvahs. It's 10 more years till bar mitzvah. But you need to know that I frumerid has payas. Payas means that his Yiddishkeit comes down to a tzitzah, to an edge, and it translates into doing a mitzvah pel mamish, doing a mitzvah behaviorally. And the priority is more kavanah, less kavanah. If you do the mitzvah, you did what the Eibishter wanted. And if Rahman said the person doesn't do the mitzvah, all the kavanah in the world is not a yid. And I think this is a lesson that you're probably not going to hear someplace else from Parsha Shlach about what's the significance of tzitzis. And so women don't wear tzitzis, but the inyan of tzitzis is very applicable. Because faket, women even more than men, for them Yiddishkeit is bringing it into the real world. The behavior, the deed, if you will. The shul and the beis medrash, which is where the man, so to speak, dominates, is more like the beged. You're wrapped in holiness. The home is a place which is more basic. But you have to bring tzitzis into the home. There has to be a holiness in the home as well. Even the physical aspects of our lives are done, like it says in Torah, both the good as well as the not doing this that we're not allowed. And these are the tzitzis, these are the teeth that preserve and guard. The Yiddishkeit should be the way the Eibishter wants. Okay, it's Wednesday, so have a good Shabbos.